Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. In this one, my friends, I'm going to be testing a GeForce GTX TITAN X in Horizon Forbidden West. This one is the reference design model Maxwell version of the card, so from the 900 series, and we're running it with the latest Nvidia drivers as usual, but I'm not manually overclocking it. Now, I usually do overclock this GPU, but I saw that the game was crashing way more often with an OC in this card, giving me DirectX errors and stuff, and at stock speeds, it's completely stable, so I'm gonna go with that. Over in Tech Power-Ups GPU-Z, you can see all of the GPU specs. It has 12 gigabytes of GDDR5 memory, which unlike the 4060 and the 3060 Ti, will allow us to use very high textures. Nice. And over on the left, we're pairing it with a Ryzen 9 7950X3D with half of its cores disabled, so it's basically a Ryzen 7 7800X3D, and it's very overkill for a Titan X, but who cares, we're just testing the GPU here. Over on the memory tab, we're using 32 gigs of DDR5 6000 MHz RAM, and let's get right into it, shall we? Alright, let's go over the settings first. As usual, I'm starting at 1080p resolution. We're also going to test some higher resolutions here, and I'm using TAA and the highest settings, so max settings, aside from vignette, chromatic aberration, and motion blur, which, you know, it is what it is. It's crap. Now, I'm not expecting great things here, and as you can see, it's already dropping down into the higher 20s, but I am expecting it not to run out of VRAM. 3060 Ti and 4060? Yeah, that was a problem with those two GPUs. Nvidia, why? As you can see, this game can utilize up to like 10 gigabytes, maybe 10.5 gigabytes in some areas at 1080p resolution of VRAM, that is. And here with the Titan X, we don't see it maxing out. It has 12 gigs of VRAM, as I told you. RAM utilization is almost at like 12 gigabytes with those other 8 gigabyte GPUs. I saw the RAM usage going up to insane values, sometimes like 14, 15 gigabytes of VRAM utilization, even after a restart of the game, by the way. So yeah, this is how it should be. Whenever you don't run out of VRAM in this particular title, the RAM usage should be at around 12 gigabytes. Anyway, the little GTX TITAN X from 2015, this is 9 years old, guys, obviously doesn't have what it takes to play this game at very high settings. I mean, it's getting 30 plus FPS sometimes, and I guess most of the time, if we venture out into a forest area, for example, it will get 30 plus, even touch 40 FPS at times at maxed out settings, which is very impressive in its own. I wouldn't play like this, but we can't deny it's impressive for a card this old. But in very intensive areas, such as city areas, little towns and stuff like that, which you will come across often in this game, it will dip down into the 20s. It's not into the lower 20s at least, so it makes me hopeful that at high settings, for example, with very high textures still, it will get us 60 or 30 plus, actually. 60 plus, I wish. I'm not sure if we will see 60 plus in this video, by the way. But yeah, 30 plus FPS should be very attainable, even in intensive areas with this GPU, whilst keeping the textures on maximum. And maximum textures in this game do look absolutely gorgeous, even at 1080p resolution. Like, most of them are simply great. Now, we've only seen it drop right at the beginning of the game. I'm wondering if it will drop over here, fighting these guys. Sometimes it drops by a little bit. Okay, yeah, it only dips down to 30 frames per second. So again, if you manage to get an overclock going, 29 FPS right there, with this GPU in this particular title, I didn't, again, because it just kept crashing on me, giving me errors from the game. Other games are fine, as I told you. Like, I've played tons of titles with an OC in this GPU, and it did absolutely fine, but here, I don't know, it must be unstable or something in Horizon Forbidden West. I've also seen a lot of people complaining about crashing issues. I haven't had any, aside from with this GPU, so I think if you're having crashing issues, just dial down your overclocks or remove them completely and it should be fixed. Okay, so we can try some FSR 2.2 on quality now. This also helps the frame rate a little bit, of course. I'm gonna go back to the other area where we started and saw the lower FPS. Here we have it, and with FSR 2 on quality, we're getting 30 plus now. Instead, oh, no, okay, it still dips down into the 20s at times, but it's not going to be as often as we saw previously, right? Over here, we're getting like mid-30s instead of low 30s, and it touched like 29 in this area right here while dropping. So, yeah, now it's only dipping down to like 32, 31, 33. It's lovely, guys. I mean, FSR2 in this game looks very, very noisy and pixelated, especially in moving things, and a lot of things will move in this particular title. That's why it looks a bit disgusting sometimes. Like in forest areas, you see a lot of grass, and there's wind as well, and it's just gonna go to hell, the picture quality, you know? It's like you're running at a low resolution. But, well, FSR is running at a low resolution, and then it upscales it to 1080p in this case. But it doesn't really do a very good job at that. Like, DLSS in this title is so much better than FSR, and that's the same for most games out there. Yeah, trust me, it's not a very good look. And the problem with the Titan X is that it's 900 series, okay? And the 900 series, if you try to use XeSS, it just dies. Like this. All right, okay, so it took a while there to apply it. It looks a little bit better, still pixelated, but it softens up the image a little bit, and it softens up the noise, so it doesn't look as bad, I think, in my opinion. But as you can see, the FPS just tank down completely. We're getting 20s. Native resolution was way better than XeSS. I'm gonna go ahead, disable the upscaling here, and set it to the high settings with very high textures. Now, in the past few videos, I have tried high settings, and I compared it to the very high settings in terms of FPS. I'm gonna restart the game just to make sure that everything applies. And I didn't see a very big improvement in FPS. And as you can see right here, we gained about like 1 or 2 frames coming from very high settings to high settings, unfortunately, and that means that we will still drop to around the same values. Instead of dropping to like 27 or 26, it's gonna drop to like 28 or 29 basically. Over here still drops to 29, 27. It is rough. So it doesn't really make much sense to play on high instead of very high in most cases, because the FPS are just going to be the same, basically. We will need to drop it down further. Let's try the medium settings now with very high textures. Good thing is we can keep the textures on very high, and the medium settings still look really good in terms of everything else, like the lighting, the crowd, terrain quality and stuff like that. It still looks really, really nice. And here we go, finally seeing a decent improvement over here of 10 FPS, or like 33% higher frame rate right here, yes. So 39, 38, 37, yeah, we gained exactly 10 frames per second comparing to the high or very high settings. Oh my god, oh boy. Okay, yeah, that was a terrible, terrible gliding experience. Anyways, it's now getting 40s down here, whereas previously we were seeing like 30, 29, 27, looking in this direction as well. Over here it dropped like crazy previously on high settings to like 25, and again, oh boy, okay, it's dipping a little bit into the low 30s. But I think if it doesn't drop down from 30 FPS in this area, 99% of the game will be above 30 FPS. So I think I myself would probably choose to play like this, guys, with the Titan X. Unfortunately, it doesn't have access to DLSS. I see a lot of people a little bit confused as to why I'm not testing DLSS with GTX cards from Nvidia, like 1050 Ti, for example. Yeah, and the 1080 Ti. These GPUs don't support DLSS. Only RTX GPUs support DLSS, which is a bit unfortunate, you know. I just really hope to see the next iteration of FSR 3.1, I believe, or 3.2, be way better in terms of its upscaler. Like, it would breathe new life into these very old GPUs. And this is already a 9-year-old GPU. Imagine if FSR had a really, really nice upscaler and it looked kind of the same as the DLSS. It would be insane, right? We could be getting like 50 frames per second right here instead of 40 FPS on average, or 45 FPS average. And with very, very similar visual quality to this. Also, another interesting thing with the GTX TITAN X over here is that even though it is a 9-year-old GPU, oh my god, And even though it's based on an architecture from 10 years ago, the first Maxwell cards actually released in 2014 in the form of the GTX 750, 750 Ti, even like the 980 and 970, I think they also released in 2014. This is 10-year-old architecture and it's pushing these frames at native 1080p resolution with very good visuals. Like medium settings look like ultra settings in other titles. This is a playable experience, it looks absolutely fantastic still, and I could enjoy the heck out of Horizon Forbidden West with a GTX TITAN X in 2024. How crazy is that, right? I'm gonna stop it right there. For these settings, this is exactly what I'd utilize, so that's why I spent a lot of time here playing around and moving around this little beautiful map here of the Burning Shores. Alright, I'm gonna keep these settings the same, but I'm gonna go up to 1440p res, which is gonna be way more intensive. But, you know, the TITAN X was a pretty good 1440p gamer back in the days when it released, even 4K gamers. So let's check it out at 1440p now. I don't need to restart right now because we didn't go over the VRAM limits, so it didn't spill into the RAM. And, well, we aren't really losing performance. If it did spill into the RAM, I would need to restart the game to apply everything. But yeah, that's not the case right here. So let's continue. And it's actually performing pretty damn well. 30-ish, 40-ish, around here. I mean, at 1080p, we'd be getting 40s to 50s instead and touching 50 FPS at times. But this is really good, guys. It looks phenomenal now at 1440p medium settings with very high textures. VRAM is still enough. I mean, very high textures, they do look really good, right? You gotta keep in mind that if you're licking things, it's not gonna look as good, but if you're just playing around, walking around like this, everything has a lot of detail put into it, so that's why it uses a lot of VRAM. It is not gonna get 30 plus all of the time. I know it for sure because back in the little area where we started, it was way more intensive than right here, but I'm still very impressed that the TITAN X can deliver these graphics at these FPS in 2024. Again, if all of the games were optimized or were as well optimized as this one is on PC, this GPU would still be very, very relevant. It has enough VRAM, it just consumes way too much power for the performance it gets, of course, compared to the newer stuff, because it's a very old GPU. But, I mean, it's consuming 200 watts of power. It's roughly the same as like a 3070 at 220 watts. Alright, finally, very intensive area, and it's starting to drop a little into the mid-20s. If you can live with dropping in these settlement areas, these town areas, it's not going to be the end of the world because you're not really going to fight robots and stuff like that over here. So, I guess it could be playable still, since it's not really stuttering or anything. So there's that. But yeah, I wouldn't really recommend drops into the 20s and mid-20s to anyone. So although it's very impressive, the performance that we're seeing right here, yeah, you should probably stick to 1080p, right? I'm gonna set it to the low settings preset now, alright? And texture quality, I'm gonna set it to high because I'm gonna set 4K resolution a little bit later. Restart the game completely, and let's see if it can handle 1440p with low settings. Alright, here we have it, guys. I'm gonna go through the settings one more time so you know. 1440p TAA, low with high textures. And yeah, it is not dropping down from 30 FPS in this scenario, which is very intensive. Previously, we saw it drop to like 27 at maximum settings and 1080p in this area. And it barely dropped from that in other areas. So maybe it can be 30 plus FPS all of the time. And again, if I could overclock the card here, it would get even better FPS. It would get like 3 or 4 more frames per second because these overclock really well. The TITAN X, the Maxwell series overall overclocks really well. And yeah, it should probably be enough to get like 10-15% more performance and get 30 plus all of the time. Unfortunately though, without an OC, with just stock speeds on the TITAN X, it drops into the lower, well, higher 20s, mid 20s sometimes. 27 FPS was the lowest there. I don't think it's gonna drop from 27 really, because that's literally the most intensive area that I've come across in this game. And I tested like 4 different major areas in the game so far, and yeah, that was the most intensive by quite a bit, you know. But now let me try it with FSR 2.2 on quality, guys, because this definitely improves things by quite a bit, and at 1440p it doesn't look as fuzzy and as noisy as it did at 1080p, although it still looks very, very noisy. I can definitely tell a difference between native and this. With DLSS, it just gets slightly, ever so slightly softer, but it's really, really close to native resolution, so it's much, much better. But yeah, here things are definitely quite a bit noisier, but it's not as big of an issue as it was at 1080p, so I think I would play like this gladly and have fun. It still looks better than 1080p resolution did, in my opinion, at least in my big monitor right here. But yeah, around this town here, high 30s and low 40s is what you should expect. Over here, 37, 36, 35, 34, 33. But it's not dropping from 33, so the little Titan X, man, it can still handle Horizon Forbidden West at 1440p. It's not real 1440p because of FSR, but I mean, it looks good still. What an awesome little card that we're running with. Just lovely. This is my favorite GPU in my collection as well, by the way. I really like it. Now let's go up to 4K resolution. And look at that. Low settings, 4K resolution with quality FSR 2 is running at 20-ish frames per second. It is not great in terms of performance, of course, but it looks absolutely awesome, guys. Even though it's running FSR quality and it's a little bit pixelated, it is absolutely fantastic of a visual fidelity here. Especially compared to everything that we've seen so far in this video. Obviously, this is not really playable. It could get close to 30 FPS, again, if you overclocked the card and if they allowed an OC on this GPU. But yeah, unfortunately, it crashes in this game and we can't really OC the card, so yeah, there's that. Now, should we disable this? Let's see how much VRAM it uses on high textures and everything else on low and native 4K resolution. 9 gigabytes. God damn it, man. If they had put 10 gigabytes on the 4060, it would be so great. Oh boy, but because they didn't, it actually stutters quite a bit in this particular title. Not as often as other games in 2023 and 24, but still, this is more stable, you know? It's sad to see a GPU from 2015 being more stable than a GPU from 2023, but it is what it is. Obviously, this is unplayable at 4K resolution, so we will need to go down to like very low settings preset here. I'm gonna keep the textures on high still, and I'll restart the game to fully apply things. And yep, it is definitely far from being enough for 30 FPS. It's kind of the same thing actually as the low settings preset, guys. So I guess it's FSR or nothing to make it playable. Or DRS. Oh yeah, I totally forgot. God damn it, I keep forgetting about DRS. Every time I said, oh, it drops to 27 FPS, you could just use dynamic resolution scaling set to 30 and get those 30, because it works really well in this title, okay? I'm actually going to utilize it right now at 4K, and although the image is quite a bit softer than 4K resolution, it's looking better than with FSR quality. And it actually gets 30 plus FPS all of the time, or at least like 30 flat most of the time, or 32, 33, whatever, very close to 30. So it can be saved. It's not really native resolution or even upscaled resolution, but the dynamic resolution scale in this game works great. So you can play at 4K. It's close enough to 4K visuals anyways. With the GTX TITAN X from 9 years ago. 9 years ago. Let that sink in. That's been it, guys. Thanks very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I really liked taking a look at this card, so maybe next time I will be back with another old GPU. Let me know what GPU you'd like me to test next in this title in the comments, and I'll make it happen. As always, love you all. Bye-bye.